All right, we should be live. People start trickling in pretty soon, but hello to anybody who is watching the VOD in post, since we don't have any viewers in our chat at the moment. Say hi to Cingeto and Calon. Via
I'm not here.
is Via is going to be joining us a little bit later. She's got some personal stuff to take care of, so we're going to be starting with her a little bit later. But the good news is, this is actually Cingeto's topic tonight, and we're going to be talking about his particular section of the Reconstruction community. So, as soon as we get a couple of people filtering in, oh, hi, Rilla, we will start talking. So, that said, how is everyone doing tonight? Calon, Cingeto, how you guys doing?
I'm doing fine. It's a beautiful night right now.
I feel like I need some mead. A nice huge bottle of liquor.
I don't know, it just seems like mead is best drank out of like a stein or something. I don't know why.
A horn, actually.
A horn.
I like steins. I like little steins.
Steins are awesome.
Horns are best. Horns are best because they're Viking.
Yeah,
And
but
they're not.
they just give you that German feel. I don't know. I just think of them and cuckoo clocks.
When I see German, I now think Christian. That's my only problem. So horns are best because. So Cingeto, what's this?
Hey,
what is this?
we've got Zacto, we've got Triatail, we've got Rilla, and AR. So looks like we've got enough people to get started, I think.
Hello, hello, our little victim. Hello, our little participant.
All right, I'm gonna go. Since we're allied, I'm gonna go put out an all call with the link in Naka's channel because we haven't done that in a while.
With Nikasuchi. Nakasuchi. So how's everyone doing? Seeing chat here. It's cold. Yeah, it's too goddamn cold here in North Carolina.
How cold's it getting now?
I don't even want to know. Don't force me to ask that question.
Just go.
Scotty is certainly in North Carolina at the moment. That's what I will say. Freaking 23 out. Yeah. Those poor snakes. Should give them a nice warm home.
Just hibernating, probably in the ground.
Hey, Gainer's here too.
Gainer. Oh, I agree. Cingeto should go to bed. Cingeto, yes, you have an 8 o'clock class tomorrow, don't you?
Alright,
Yeah.
So since I just tagged a bunch of people and we've got people trickling in, Cingeto, you were the one who brought this particular topic to our attention, so let's start off with sort of explaining what we're here for.
Basically, today I wanted to go over a terrible group I have just been informed recently that exists, and I'm quite sad that it exists. It is a group called Daru, and it is basically a Gaulish folkish group. If you weren't here for other streams, you don't know what folkish means. Folkish is basically just a racist pagan or someone who influenced racism into their praxis and into their belief structure.
I'd say it's a bit more complicated than that. Folkism is kind of a form of ethno-nationalism. It basically, folkist groups tend to state that you have to have some sort of genetic background with the particular group of people that your religion was once a part of in order to practice that particular religion. Other versions of folkism privilege the opinions of those who are part of the modern day version of those cultures over those who are not. There are groups in the Hellenist community that are like that. So it's sort of, it's racism, but it's a bit more complex than that.
Well, it goes deeper, but I was trying to give a general definition.
Yeah, but if we're talking about folkism, like we're talking mostly to a pagan audience, so we might as well get a little bit deeper since we've got a whole stream to explain it.
True.
All right, what's this group called, Cingeto? Is it like Ruda or Radu or
Rida? Daru.
Huh? Oh, Daru. Okay. Yeah, they're the ones with the
the horrible symbol.
The horrible
really
they didn't hire any graphic artists. That's like the whole point of fascism, you know.
So basic,
Okay, so Calon, if either you or Cingeto could DM me that image really quick, I can pop it up onto the screen for people to see. In case we've got any Celtic recons that need to kind of dodge this group, if they see this anywhere, then, well, they'll know whoever they're talking to is an asshole.
Definitely. And they need to be. And they need to be hit in Minecraft.
Hit in Minecraft. Let me find the symbol. I'll find it real quick, and then I will give it to you. But I will go ahead and warn all of y'all, the symbol is really gross. Because it is just really poorly made. It's so basic. It's like a hybrid.
Gainer, this symbol is going to freak you out as a graphic designer, okay? It will. It's worse than my runes, than the color scheme of my runes. And he'll get what I'm saying there.
All right. Well, if one of you can DM it to me, then I can pop it into the OBS really quick so folks can see it.
Don't worry. If Cingeto doesn't get it to you within the next 5 minutes, I'll kick him off the stream.
I already got it. I already did it. Too late.
All right. Good. See? So I won't kick him off the stream. See how that works? You just have to threaten Cingeto. Really.
Oh, gods. Why?
I know. It's really
what
bad.
What are they fucking thinking about with the texturing on this shit? Like, what? What am I even looking at? Wow.
It's hard to miss. That's the good part.
Yeah, I guess so. So I'm gonna have to make it smaller, but this is an assault on my eyes, and I apologize for everyone who's having to look at it. I'm gonna clear it off the screen in a minute, but wow. Here, let's make this smaller and just kind of sit it over here somewhere for a minute. Like, kind of try not to cover up the chat. OBS is like a bitch to work with.
Like, Gainer, if you thought my runes had a bad color scheme, I don't think I could beat that.
No one can beat that. That is...
Alright, well, hopefully that doesn't get in the way of anything, but I'll just let that sit there. I'll get rid of it in a few, but it hurts. You all can suffer with us. Congratulations, you now know what a racist looks like. At least one of the symbols they use.
Beware, the Celtic racists have horrible, horrible graphic design ability.
That's where it's my eyes have been touched.
So here's an interesting thing. Cingeto, there are a number of Celts who believe that they are descended from their gods. Do you want to talk about how this belief factors into the racism of this particular group?
I haven't seen that factor into this group from what I've seen of the group. I know there's a few ideas on there about the how that works together, but I haven't seen that specifically manifested in the group. And if it does, I haven't seen that part of the group. The main stuff that I've seen from them would be putting race over religion and things along those lines.
Why would you even... That makes no sense.
That's what they
race
said.
Over religion?
From their members.
Race over religion? What?
You want me to send them to you?
I mean, I guess if you've got like a screenshot.
I got 2 screenshots.
Alright guys, I guess this is going to be a visual presentation, far more so than our usual live streams, so, is there any personally identifiable information that you need to, like, make sure you blur that out before you send me anything.
You're right, I need to crop that out.
Yep.
We want to expose all fascists here.
No, we can get in trouble in YouTube for that, with YouTube for that, Calon.
Oh.
Like, if this is Facebook stuff, people's real names might be involved, and we need to at least blur those out.
So I will basically just make it so it's just the text.
Okay, that works.
If I can find where the other one was. I found one of them. I'll just there's one if I can remember where I put it.
Yes, the triangle within the circle is an alchemical symbol, Mistress Angelica.
Poorly used one. Gosh, that's horrible. I'll send you the first one. This one isn't the one where they say put race over religion, but it's still pretty bad. So there you go.
All right. Apologies for how huge these images are when I first moved them in. Like, that's just kind of a consequence of the way OBS works. I'm still learning how to work with it. We're all learning together.
See, y'all are developing the.
All right, so now that this is over our faces, so that like we can just emphasize how shit this is. Apparently, they realize they're folkish, so at least they admit it.
They admit they're folkish, but they're still folkish.
So that last sentence isn't even coherent. So for all the folks that are just listening, I'll read it out for everybody. Recently, we have had a wave of people angry at the mere existence of folkish Celtic pagans. We will not be swayed. We shall remain strong in our conviction of our people, our culture, and our faith. The opinions of leftists, atheists, and Satanists on what they so desperately what Celtic polytheism to be has no value.
Basically, they're really bad at everything. And I'll definitely be getting into why folkism is horribly incompatible with Celtic paganism in general in a moment. But I do want to
just
first
remember
off,
to take breaths in between your words, Cingeto. Like, people need to understand you to understand what you're saying.
Yeah, Cingeto, if you stop breathing, I will kick you off stream.
Basically,
like calling 911.
Basically, from that tweet, you can already see the. I think I consider that stage 3 othering, not stage 4 yet, but stage 3 othering when it comes to that.
So, all right, go take a couple steps back and talk about the stages of othering, please, for folks in the back who haven't heard of this before.
Already, othering is where where basically you try to push all the faults of the world and everything, and try to separate your in group from your out group. Othering would consist. Stage 1 would be basically where, well, there's this group and there's this group, and we're just a bit different. Then there's stage 2. That first one was stage 1. Stage 2 would be where you have
breaths can get out. You are really rushing through this.
Sorry. All right. Basically, stage 2 would be where there's a fair bit of animosity where you don't like them because they're not like you with the other group, but you don't completely hate them. And then stage 3 is where you start demonizing the other group.
Okay, so stage 1 would be like, okay, you've got the cheerleaders and you've got the anime geeks, and we're different, but we both exist. Stage 2 would be like, well, fuck the cheerleaders because they're prissy and we don't really like them. Stage 3 would be like, the cheerleaders, we hate the fucking cheerleaders, and they can't even sit with us or be anywhere near us.
Well, you also demonize them and slander them too. And then stage 4 is where you turn against each other within the group, like the Salem witch trials, for example.
Okay, so stage 4 would be like, oh god, you're sympathizing with the cheerleaders to the gallows.
It doesn't appear that they've dissolved internally yet. It will. That's what happens with othering, but it doesn't appear that they've gone that far yet. But
so it's basically the no true Scotsman fallacy, but with humans.
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're trying to other everyone and put them in their own little box to explain why they don't agree with them, so that they can feel justified in their own beliefs.
Right. Like we do to Cingeto on this show.
Hashtag cancel Cingeto. Hashtag Calon your mic. Can I get a Calon your mic from chat, please? Anyway.
Yeah, come on, chat.
So, let's go ahead and start with the basics. What makes this particular group, apart from the fact that they recognize this, folkish? Like, what kinds of things have you seen? Apart from the one post saying, race over religion and blah, 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 blah. Like, can you talk a little bit about the beliefs within the group that very clearly identifies them as such? Like, for example, the AFA very clearly had some shit around, True Blood Norse and folks like that, people of Nordic ancestry being the inheritors of the faith.
It's pretty much the same thing from what I've read on this group, from their description of themselves. They call themselves folkish and ethnocentric. They
All right, and who do they think are the true inheritors of the Celtic religion? Considering there's a number of different ethnic groups that practice Celtic polytheism, correct?
Considering they're Gaulish, I'd assume it'd be French people. Because that's a common belief. I know that's it's not completely accurate, but that's a common belief when it comes to these people. I do know in other groups when it comes to this stuff that there's a standard belief that what was it? There's a standard belief. Sorry, it popped out of my head. All right, yeah, okay. There's a standard belief that the French were basically the inheritors of the Gauls, and they're all basically just Gaulish, and that anyone who isn't from France cannot be truly Gaulish. I know that's an old historical belief from a while ago that they used to use in French nationalism and things like that. I remember reading a paper on that. So I assume it's something along those lines, since they are explicitly Gaulish, because I've seen them make posts about the Gaulish gods and such.
Mm-hmm.
They look pan-Celtic from their symbol, because they use a triskelion, and that's generally a common symbol between all of them. And just so everyone knows, it's the folkish symbol is the triangle in the circle with the triskelion. It's not just the triskelion. just because I had some people ask me about that earlier when I was making sure people know what the symbols look like. So I'm just explaining it here as well.
Okay, so for like folks in the back, do you want to explain some of the basic tenets of Celtic Reconstructionism? Because we have a fair number of atheists in our circle, and I'm not sure if all of them actually made it to the panel we did over on Naka's, kind of talking a little bit about the basic beliefs.
I can go over the virtues, which is one. I can go over those, which would be one of the biggest thing I need you to pull back up the list. I could go over
All right,
those.
so like go ahead and start there and slow down.
Okay.
I will be right
All right.
back.
But look at my profile and just move with the rhythms of the animal.
I love your snake.
He's so cute, isn't he?
He is. Alrighty. There's basically there are 6 virtues: honor, loyalty, hospitality, honesty, justice, and courage. And probably the biggest one I'd say that they're breaking would be hospitality. That's what I'd say, because they're basically trying to exclude everybody else, which goes directly against that. Would you say a similar thing when it comes to the AFA, Calon?
No. The AFA, it's a little more direct. They're seeing basically they're evil and deserve no frit.
No, I'm saying, wouldn't they be breaking hospitality against people by being ethnocentric?
All right, I'm back. What specifically are you guys like? You're talking about breaking hospitality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The AFA would be breaking hospitality.
I mean, yes, they would do that by default.
Well, if you're talking about Greek Xenia, then yes, because they wouldn't extend hospitality or gifts back to their host in the first place.
Well, that's one of the virtues that they break. Big one.
But within heathenry itself, like, it's complicated. Basically, they're breaking peace by rejecting people and rejecting family members and whatnot. So yeah, we'll put it under hospitality. Why not?
I think that's probably the biggest thing to be breaking, most explicitly, at least. All right.
Okay.
Huh?
So, do you want to go over some of the beliefs of the group beyond just the specific ethnocentrism? Like, are there any other sort of beliefs that deviate from generalized Celtic practice?
I haven't been able to dig up anything else.
Or how does the ethnocentrism manifest within the group?
Probably, mostly from what I can see, is by making it exclusionary.
Okay.
Well, there are other ways that it also will manifest. That being, the group itself will judge other groups explicitly only by their own standards. So, for example, within America, when we say that cheeseburgers are better than whatever cultural food, we're being a little ethnocentric in that way. Or this value is better than that value in that culture because, well, it's our value. That's being ethnocentric. And so for the Gaulish, they would be viewing other groups, this Gaulish focus, they would be viewing other groups using their own standards, saying, oh, well, this group isn't racially pure enough. Therefore, they are inferior to us. And stuff of that nature.
Are there any particular groups that they go after?
Haven't seen it yet. They've only been around since 2018, from what I've seen. So they're fairly new so far.
Okay. So, you said you wanted to get into, like, places where their beliefs are incompatible with the general Celtic beliefs.
Where how folkish beliefs would be incompatible with Celtic stuff was the main thing I was going for.
Okay.
The first one would be foster culture within the Celtic societies. That kind of stuff pretty much destroys any kind of ethno-purist mythology, or not myths. What's the better way of saying it? Ethno-pure pseudo history they want to propose about the Gauls or about any Celtic society. Foster culture was very large, and it happened a lot. It's even within the myths of very, very significant gods, like Lu or Lugus or Slu.
Cingeto, when I tell you to slow down, I mean enunciate your words.
Oh, sorry. Well, I said slow because I think that's how you say it in the Welsh, from what I've learned so far.
Now,
But he was right there. Lou was a foster child and taken care of by Man McLear in the Irish Tales. And within society, you can do your research, or I could probably find some other stuff about foster culture in the first place. But if you just look into the
That sounds like a great topic for a video.
foster culture, it would be a great topic. I do remember another theory,
Hint,
but
hinge, nudge, nudge, elbows you in the gut.
I do know one theory. I haven't seen any evidence for this yet because I haven't researched it too far, which I will when I finally work on the Matrone video. But there's an idea that the reason why the Earth goddess isn't mentioned as much in the Celtic texts or in shown in Celtic iconography as much as the Matrone is because it might have been in part of the mythology or the stories that the Matrone were actually the mothers who received the human race as their foster children instead of the mother god or the Earth goddess, which is an interesting idea. And if I can find proper evidence for that, that would also be a point against folkism. But since I don't have any evidence for that, I can't use it yet. And then another reason would be the very nature of being Celtic. Celtic isn't based off of some bloodline or some blood descendants. It's actually a term that really only works as a description of language. And that is the binding aspect of basically Celtic Reconstructionists is the fact that they speak a Celtic language. That's a very critical thing that you at least understand parts of the language so you can engage with it with that. It's a pretty big identifier when it comes to religion and praxis is knowing how to speak parts or the full language. And since it's defined by language and not by race, it doesn't even make sense to be ethnocentric in the first place.
So what you were saying was there wasn't really a unified Celtic culture, the way that we would think of it today.
There's definitely unity between it, but there wasn't. There's unity between.
There was linguistic unity.
There's linguistic unity, and through that, there's a level of religious unity, but there wasn't an ethnic unity.
Yeah, you get kind of something similar with the Greek city-states. Athens and Sparta, are the two that I like to bring up, but
no, they're the same.
They're radically different. Right
they're all
down
Greek
like everything between Calon, bar. But no.
Exactly, Greeks are barbarian. Yeah, they're
the
just
two
all
of them,
going barbar.
They were united by slightly different dialects of the same language and by, at the very least, belief in the same gods, though not the same festival calendar or even the same stories, it seems. The more you uncover as you get into Recon, the more you discover that you kind of have to pick one of the various city-states and try to recon based off of that. Most people do it with the Attic calendar. Because it's the most complete that we have as far as that which has survived, because the Athenians were quite passionate about scholarly things and kept a lot of records about a lot of stuff. But all of the different Greek city-states, this idea that there was any sort of unified Greece is kind of laughable, because the closest to unified they ever got was under the Romans, when the Roman emperors and such took over. But, actual Greek city-states practiced wildly differently and even spoke slightly different dialects.
Oh, there's a lot of dialects in the Celtic languages, especially just within Gaulish itself. There's a lot of dialects.
So apparently we have a recon in the chat who has an issue with the claim that there isn't really a unified, race/culture for Celtic stuff.
I didn't say there was a unified culture. I said there's unifying aspects of the culture. There's also distinctions.
I suppose. Because of the delay, I'm not quite sure what they were responding to, so if they want to clarify in the chat really quick what they were taking issue with, if I misinterpreted that, then, that'll come up in a minute or two.
Because there isn't a unified ethnicity, because the Gauls especially spread to places like Anatolia, northern Africa, all over the place. So any claim to Gaulish...
Oh, the person was talking to Kadama, never mind.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, anyway, is there anything else that you want to cover with this Daru group?
Let me think, what else is there? I think that was the main thing I wanted to get off, was talking about the issues with how their theology does not manifest properly, especially with those 2 points about foster culture and then how Celticity is defined and bound together.
So when you talk about their theology, though, you haven't really covered what it is they believe.
because I've been able. Well, that is the theological issue is with the ethnocentrism.
Mm.
That's what they. I know that's what they believe. That's what I've been able to dig up so far on them.
So, how big do you think this group actually is?
Considering they're Gaulish, they're not going to be that big. But considering relatively, or just in general, because there's bigger focus groups out there, but relatively, they're probably huge because there's like 200 Gauls or practicing Gaulish polytheists in the world today. There's not that many, so they're.
Ah, okay. So we got a clarification from Kadama. Apparently, the person was taking issue with a claim that they made about Irish tradition considering the Tuatha De Danann family.
Okay.
So,
What?
I believe they claimed that they were descended from the Tuatha De.
I mean, that's a belief some people hold to, or it might have, and it's possible it's been historical. I've heard some people suggest that, but I haven't done too much research into it to really give a proper answer.
So, I guess, do you guys want to start talking about folkism as a broader topic and how
That's
it
what
can
I was.
do harm?
That's what I was originally hoping we were going to do with the stream. Is I didn't know we were going to specifically target Daru for the stream. I thought we were going to talk about folkism and mention them at the end.
Well, then go ahead and thank Calon for that, because Calon specifically told me that you wanted to go after a group. That's why I titled it the way I did.
Oops.
Speaking of which, Calon appears to be AFK at the moment, so I was going to bring up the AFA, considering the AFA is kind of the shining example of what happens with folkism and Reconstructionism. Right?
Do you want to talk about it? Or do you want to save it for Callan? Do you want to talk about the Greek stuff too to go ahead and get that settled as well?
Well, the thing is we're still working.
What do we talk? Okay.
We're talking
Hi.
about the AFA and the AFA's effect on, sort of the ripple effect that it had on the community and how it caused problems. I was saying that you probably needed to be here for that because you appeared to be AFK at the time.
I'm back. I had to go do something real quick.
Well, do you want to give the audience a brief history of the AFA and the events that kind of led up to them being classified as a hate group?
Oh yeah, that. Nasty business right there. Starts out with a guy named McNeilin. McNeilin starts talking about how the gods are in our blood. And that basically leads to a split. Over time, the AFA started using more ethnocentric dialogue. And what I mean by that is they started calling, for example, they started calling everyone who would not be white, but would say be worshiping like Thor or Freya. They would call them appropriate. They would say that they are appropriating their beliefs and whatnot, or the gods.
We actually just got a great question from the chat. If you want me to take a quick break and answer it, because we actually saw in our own community, and I think it's been long enough that we can talk about it. The Triatail asks, do focus tend to have a lot of influence beyond the pagan heathen circles? And the answer is they can make us look very bad, and Calon actually had a direct experience with that.
Well, I'm getting to that.
Well, I was talking about the event that happened on a different channel.
Yeah. Yeah, I can get into that later. But right now, all right, where was I in the story?
You were talking about the gods are in our blood.
Yeah, gods are in our blood, McNeilin. So basically, over time, this ethnocentric dialogue, so to speak, became like more and more obvious until finally now we have, and McNeilin was expelled, from what I understand at one point from the group. But anyhow, until now they're basically going and posting the 14 words. And so yes, the Sovereign Law Poverty Center did come along and they did label it a hate group. And unfortunately, since that was one of the main representatives for heathenry at the time, it basically branded heathenry itself as a hateful movement.
Which Triatiel, that's sort of the answer to your question. Is
And
it can make the rest of us look bad if one of those organizations
well,
gets big.
That's why I really
yeah.
do not want Daru to get big because we're so
Anyhow,
small and they're
yeah.
proportionally horrible.
Let me talk.
Sorry.
So basically, it took a long period of time and a lot of work from many other events going through and explaining what various symbols and whatnot meant before the SPLC finally relented and said, okay, not all heathens are like this. And how we can sort of reclaim our own symbols, like the runes. So, for example, Oda, Othila. That is a rune that is it's pronounced as an O in Old Norse. It traditionally stands for like inheritance, things like inheritance, ancestry, not so much like bloodline, but more like spiritual line and various things of that nature. That one was one of those that we had to rescue from the from appropriation from the fascists. And the Tyr rune, which is a rune that is literally emblematic of the god Tyr, lord of god roughly associated with justice, as well as some more, and duty, and so on and so on. So that is the brief history of what went down in heathenry. Now, you basically have heathenry divided down the line between those that support folkish beliefs and those that don't. And that's where we get into things like Declaration 127, which is a specific document that comes from, that references.
Do you want to read off Declaration 127, or at least the relevant parts of it pertaining to the story?
Yeah, well, I just need to explain what it is first. So basically, Declaration 127 comes from Hobomol 127. I'll pull it up real quick. Hobomol 127, and sure, why not?
All right, AR, I'm going to correct you for the umpteenth time. No, not all white supremacists are specifically Nazis. They are all white supremacists, but if you start to call all white supremacists Nazis, the term Nazi loses its meaning.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just shutting that down before it turns into a garbage fire in the chat.
Oh boy, we don't need a garbage fire.
All right, so what Hobomol 127 says: Lord Father, listen to my counsel. You will fare well if you follow it. This is actually very common in sort of the Lord Father part of the entire poem of Hobomol. It will help you if you do it. If you are aware that another is wicked, say so. Make no frith. And here he translates it as truce or treaty, which, okay, that's fine. Truce or treaty with foes. So make no frith with foes. The actual like Old Norse tends to be rendered more like wicked, evil is another word. Forget what the actual Old Norse word is they use there. But basically what this declaration says, we will not tolerate evil. Or we will not tolerate racism, homophobia. Basically you come here, you come into our hearth, and you will be treated with respect, and race, religion, nationality, well, religion kind of does matter. Race, nationality, and various other factors do not matter. The focus obviously don't go with that. So that's how you can know if a heathen group is roughly safe or not. Is it when they put out Declaration 127. So, yeah, there. A nice little brief history of heathenry. Comments?
I mean, the too long didn't read version is that the effect the AFA had rippled outward like nearly infinitely, to the point where recently when you came onto a stream on an allied channel of ours, a couple of folks that came on to talk with you immediately said that in order to talk about heathenry, we have to talk about white supremacy. Like that, the effect of that particular group spread outwards to the point where when most people think about Norse images, or at least when some people do, those who are aware of it immediately think back to the AFA. They don't think about folks like you and Ocean and Wolf that are diligently working to reconstruct your faith and are actively also working for acceptance.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so saying that, like, in order to talk about the Norse gods, you have to talk about heathenry. It's like saying in order to talk about Christianity, we must talk about the Confederacy. It's like you're just trying to create an association that is overall negative and basically saying that I'm a horrible person for holding these beliefs because you don't like what some of them are associated with. And when you actually look at, like, Nazi beliefs, they're much different than what the Norse believed. Like, I mean, it sounds, if you actually are in heathenry, it just sounds so obvious, but it's amazing the amount of people to where they don't understand that.
Well, I mean, most people's mythological education is pretty lackluster in America. I mean, there's still a lot of people that don't have problems with their Disney Hercules movie, even though, like, 3/4 of his feats that were in that movie were from other heroes.
Is his name pronounced Heracles? Supposed to be in the Roman texts.
Heracles, and it's in Greek. Hercules is Roman.
Okay, so that's the wrong.
Also, like him riding the Pegasus, that was Bellerophon.
Bellerophon. Yeah,
Bellerophon.
I think the most recent media for Norse stuff that came out was actually God of War, which they did an interesting twist based on the Eddas, but like, okay. They got some stuff cool, other stuff not so cool.
But I mean, we're starting to see, like, anti-Semitism and anti-Turkish sentimentality in the Hellenist community as well. One of the biggest organizations out there in both Greece and America has anti-Semitic lines in their book, like their theology book. We'll be doing an expose on them fairly soon, but one of the lines in their theology book actually spends several paragraphs condemning Christianity for the, wholesale cultural slaughter of Greeks and other people, which is justified, but then calls Christianity, quote, the expansionist arm of Judaism when geography could no longer contain it, which is extremely anti-Semitic. Like, we're starting to see more and more of these sorts of beliefs emerge within the pagan communities, and it's kind of up to us to stop them from getting a foothold.
Yeah, so a lot of these beliefs are mainly shaped by ethno-nationalist ideologies rather than religious ideologies.
This group also talks about motherland and fatherland as well, which is a big red flag.
Yeah, well, so basically the idea is sort of rooted in this Nazi idea of Bluten, which in German means blood and soil, and that the idea being that there's a mystical connection between a people and their land. And so with that mystical, with this idea of a mystical connection, this gets, and the similarity between that and, say, like, pagan spirituality towards nature and whatnot, those two get sort of confounded. And so the idea is that to, like, return to the native religion is to return to what your true ethnicity is.
Which is very much the argumentation that this group has put, which can be very complicated when you start talking about animism and you start talking about things like sacred sites or some of the Native American tribes, which talk about the direct connection between a people and their land. This is a very different sort of, bullshit, so to speak. Like, with Native Americans and such, the religious tie to the land has a lot to do with the animistic ways in which their culture were practiced, whereas it's more of a tool of subjugation when you put it in the hands of ethno-nationalists. And oftentimes, the Reconstructionist versions of religions, or I'm going to put this in air quotes, Reconstructionists, because a lot of the time, they will create their own mythos and their own mythologized histories in order to try to make their ethnocentric beliefs, like, they mold their religion into their ethnocentric beliefs.
And where we see this is within we see this as a huge problem, mostly actually in Slavic paganism. So Rod Noveri refers to Slavic. I'm not going to call it Reconstructionism, even though they would call it Reconstructionism, but it's based off of the Book of Vidish, which is actually a forgery in itself. But people will still take that as their text because they don't have anything else. The Slavs got really hit hard by Christianization, as did all pagans, but the Slavs even worse than the Celts.
Some of the Slavic religions still exist. Like the Lithuanian religion still exists to some degree.
It does, yeah.
It does, but it's highly Christianized. I mean, that's why, for example, you have Romuva, which is Baltic paganism.
Well, and you said that you see it a lot with the Slavic religions, but you see it a lot in Greek Reconstructionism as well. That group that I mentioned, the one that talks about fatherland, talks about a unified Greek nation, when historically that was never the case. Another big red flag when you're dealing with...
Let me finish at this point, because what I'm about to say is actually a lot more... This is what makes the Rod Noveri stand out, and that is they have this dialogue towards both anti-Semitic and anti-Christian, and the idea is that basically the Christians and the Jews came together in this big conspiracy to wipe out paganism, and some will even actually combine it with Catholicism, weird enough. How that works exactly is very weird.
Really weird.
So yeah, that's the kind of a historical nonsense we're talking about.
I've never heard of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Well,
all right, now you can go on.
Coming back to sort of the problems in Greek Reconstructionism, there's actually another sort of big red flag that you can kind of look for when you're talking about these groups. A number of them, from what I understand, including the AFA, will use some variation on, quote, worship of scholarly sources or scholarly privileging. So when they talk about, like, the Greek ethno-nationalist stuff, you'll often see their members tweeting about how people will cite scholarly sources against, quote, their lived experience, as though this is a religion that has continued from antiquity. Often, these groups will also claim some form of, we jokingly call it, famtrad Wicca, because there are, like, Wiccans who claim that their family traditions go back eons. The Greek Reconstructionist groups often claim that several of their members that are ethnically Greek have some form of the religion that has been passed down in secret through the Christian persecution and such. So these problems, you can pick up the red flags pretty quickly in their rhetoric. When people start talking about fatherland, when they start talking about the particular ethnicity should determine the course of a Reconstructionist faith. In the case of the Greek group, they talk about the Greeks should define what Hellenization is, like ethnic Greeks should. And it's different when you're dealing with a religion that actually has survived for long periods of time. Things like, for example, the Nawa faith, various Native American practices, Maruba.
Yoruba isn't Native American; it's African, by the way.
I know, but I was saying, like, just a number of,
I know,
like,
that's for the audience.
Vudon is another one.
Yeah, Vodun, which is a syncretization of Yoruba faith with Catholicism.
You also have things like Dutch powwow, which are syncretizations of, like, Dutch folk traditions and, like, evangelical Christianity. There's a lot of different traditions where folks might want to protect their tradition because of, people who try to poach it for profit. You have neo-shamanism and things like that, but that's very different than a Reconstructionist, like, trying to recreate a faith that has died out. And I think that that's an important thing to discuss, don't you?
I always thought it was a given, though, but guess not.
I mean, again, there are folks within the Greek Reconstructionist community that do actively compare themselves to Native Americans when it comes to, quote, protecting their religion.
Right, because it's the idea that they have right. So you get that basically from, well, the Greek gods are Greek, so therefore any worship outside of that is an appropriation of the Greek gods. When really, that's the theology is like shockingly weak, because then you're just limiting the gods to ethnicity, which itself is a social construct.
Well, and like that's kind of the point, right? Like when you're talking from a pagan perspective, which is what we're here to do. I know we do have atheists in the audience, but when you're talking from a pagan perspective, when you try to tell the gods who they're allowed to associate with, which is effectively what you're doing when you're excluding people from seeking out your faith, because paganism doesn't proselytize the way that other faiths do, at least the vast majority of us don't. So if somebody feels called to the faith, you're basically telling the gods, no, you don't know what's best. And that's fucking silly. It's also hubris. Like, from the Greek side, they should be ashamed of themselves.
It's really stupid and really bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this isn't. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's cringy when you see it.
Well, and
Cringy
I think,
and negative.
well, and I think it's important to equip people both with the red flags to look for, like we just discussed. Which, if you guys have any more that you can come up with, then feel free to discuss. But I think it's also important to talk about arguments like the one we just made, so that if folks in our community end up running across these people, they're at least prepared to deal with some of the crap that they're saying.
So, right, other red flags for heathenry will tend to be if someone says they're a heathen atheist. That is a red flag. That is a huge red flag, in fact, because a lot of the folkists aren't actually theists; they're atheists, and they will use their atheism to justify saying that it's cultural appropriation by saying, "Oh, well, the gods aren't real anyway, so you're just taking native white religion and appropriating it for your own purposes."
Well, we've also got to discuss,
And
though,
the
that
other,
some atheists call themselves heathens because of misappropriating the term anyway.
well, yeah. Also, the other huge red flag is when someone says Odinism.
Yeah, Odinism's the big one.
Sometimes people make mistakes.
Asatru, I think, is another one, isn't it, nowadays?
That's the
Well,
truth.
Sotru is,
I do want to say one thing though about Odinism. Some people do make the mistake though. This is not common, but just keep this in mind. Some people do say that, call themselves an Odinist. This has happened before, where they just
yeah,
so that has happened before. It's not always the case, but that has happened before.
Yeah, I'm about to cover that actually.
Okay, sorry.
So, Odinism as a term itself is actually, it was originally kind of what you would call heathenism. And so that's why you'll get some older heathens who will say, like, I'm an Odinist, even though it makes you cringe when you hear it.
I'm Zedeusist.
Yeah. Well, it's not even, it'd be like, what was the other?
We speak different dialects of ancient Greek. We've gone over this.
There's only one. No, I'm kidding.
Well, you should speak Aeolic Greek. Aeolic is the proper Greek.
Oh, Ali, did you get the other image or the other thing I sent you?
I did, but we're so far off the topic that at this point I hadn't seen an opening to put it up.
Okay, I'm gonna pull up Daru in a minute. Not yet though, but I do want to. I remembered one more thing I do want to say.
Yeah, you have Odinism, and a lot of Odinists are actually also atheists. You do occasionally find the the Odinist atheist who is not racist, but those tend to be rare. In fact, most focus, as I said, are not even theistic. So yeah, there.
So Cingeto, do you want to talk about red flags from this particular organization? Like, any that you've seen in Celtic Reconstructionism?
I give you the ones that I've seen in Celtic Reconstructionism in general, because this organization is still I'm still having a hard time digging up everything else I can. But another red flag would be where they connect it to some kind of romanticized journey to try to take over the old Celtic nations and re-bring them back to their old pagan glory and all that kind of, basically that fluff, that jazz, if you know what I mean. because I think
there's a version of that for Greek Reconstructionists too. They talk about like
Retake
reclaiming Greece.
Constantinople.
Yeah, they talk about reclaiming Greece from the Greek Orthodox Church and, protecting the interest of the ethnic Greeks. Though theirs is really interesting because they tried to subvert the idea of ethnocentrism with, well, anyone can Hellenize just as any foreigner could move into Greece and integrate into the culture. And those who do properly Hellenize are considered to be Greek, but it's the ethnic Greeks who decide what Hellenization means.
there you go. I've heard all this. I have not heard all those specifics. But I do know that the that crazy wooey nationalism is a common thread. Just in general, if they link their religion too much to something along that line, it's a general red flag. Not always, take it with a grain of salt, as always, but that can definitely be a big red flag. Another one would be, let me think. Another one would be obsessive anti. Let's see, obsessive anti.
One of you guys has background noise.
Obsessive anti Abrahamics. Like I don't like I despise the Abrahamic religion just as much as the other guy. But if they're obsessive, like I can't remember what's this website called, Smash Christianity, where they literally want to just have this other wooey nonsense of taking back the world from Christianity and this spectacular display and killing all the Christians and things like that.
Well, if they seem more interested in bashing Christianity than they do talking about their own faith.
Yeah, basically along those lines. When they're basically, instead of being a pagan, they sound like an anti-Christian. That's all their paganism is to them, is just being anti-Christian. That's another red flag.
Which is really sad, because much like atheists, we tended to a lot of us went through angry pagan phases where we had problems with Christianity because a lot of us grew up in those faiths and were abused by them. But, if that extends into your practice itself, then we got a problem, mate.
That's really unhealthy. The gods aren't going to like it that you're not doing. That's really bad.
Well, plus, if the Christian God is real, he's already kind of a douchebag. Do you really want to waste your time pissing him off even more?
I don't even get why it matters to them. If you already have a new religion, enjoy it, but I don't know.
I mean, the only way it matters to me is when I get discriminated against, because I live in the freaking South.
With you.
Yeah, these people
never start fights with me. I'm agreeable.
Fuck off, Calon. Your Twitter makes you out a liar.
Your Twitter exposed you.
We have receipts. They're all you have to do is just click your Twitter handle for every receipt ever.
People just have animosity over nothing, and the people who aren't doing anything to them, and they just have it just innately.
Right, like me.
That's not like you. You're not. Not. Yeah, okay.
I'm the most agreeable person in the world.
In all seriousness, though, coming back to the topic at hand, another way that one can inoculate themselves against folkism, again, is to kind of to verse yourself in anti-focused arguments. Sort of get yourself educated on what folkism looks like. Videos like ours are helpful. We have another discussion on folkism, actually, where we went a little more in-depth with the AFA. It's far older on the channel. It's back when we were still called PolyOlogy, so it's worth digging into the old files and taking a look at it. But if you start to see people talking about ethnicity, about fatherland, about, any sort of
our people,
any sort of ethnic claim to their faith, it's worth having a conversation with them to see where these things come from, right? The person might have just gotten into it. They might have heard these arguments and kind of been swayed by them. And sometimes having a discussion well, do you really think the gods would only associate with people whose, DNA carries this? Or, another example, to sort of argue against it, is to talk about the way that heritability works with genes. Because, let's face it, we're all mudbloods, right? It doesn't matter how pure you think your race is, we're all fucking mudbloods. Everybody breeds with everybody. There's a lot of people whose parents are not those listed on their birth certificates. It's even more likely that your ancestors, at some point, were not your parents listed on your, birth certificate. The milkman, the barman, the maid, etc. So... adopted kids, etc. So, like, you can't even know if you actually have genetic heritage where it says you do. And even if you do, if at any point, which, like, by the laws of nature you would have to, if any point there was any so-called ethnic mixing in your background, you don't know what percentage of any of your genes you actually inherited from that particular, like, genetic transaction. So, like, there's no way to know whether you're carrying,
I don't know what you guys
like,
are
some
talking about.
magic,
I come from Africa.
like, some magic specific gene that is gonna flag the gods that you are the person to talk to. There's no bloody way that you would know if you've actually got that or not. But what you can know is if you've experienced them. You can know if you feel called to it, if you feel like you're coming home, or if you have a particular draw to a faith. And that should be far more powerful than any supposed
mystical amino sequence that makes you connect to the gods.
basically, like, there isn't, like, if we could isolate the
It's
gene that
called
connects people to the
barcoding.
gods, then that person would win the Nobel Prize.
It's called barcoding theology. That's what I'm calling it.
Theology.
Barcoding theology.
I'm gonna use that now. I'm using that
Because now the gods that come, they scan you. Oh, nope, doesn't have the right gene.
Trademark.
Barcode didn't match.
Let's go on our shirt now.
Okay, so, like, I'm just imagining now, like, I get my freaking lustral water all made, is standing at my altar, incense smoke is rising, put the freaking olives on there, start my prayer to Athena. All of a sudden, there's just, like, as though it were, some sort of floating fucking screen. 404, God's not found, does not possess correct genetic code. Well, fuck.
Exactly. That's how it works. Except it's a red line, like at the grocery market, and they're just taking you and they're scanning you.
Yeah, that's what the gods do. They take you to your little to the self-checkout machine and start scanning.
Well, I guess that throws away the idea of remarkable greatness. The gods are so inept they can only contact people who have a specific nucleotide sequence. Which one, we don't even freaking know. We're too dumb to figure it out. Like, I mean, if you crack jokes like
Barcode.
that, humor like what we just did is a fantastic way to disarm racists. I mean, for one thing, you're not arguing with them for them most of the time. You're arguing with them for the audience, as everybody knows who's ever won a debate.
I did want to.
What's a debate? I don't know what this thing called a debate is.
I did want to bring up one more thing about Daru, or a few more. First off, there's also, I talked about the extreme anti-Abrahamics. I also have the reverse of that, where your race is so important that your religion means nothing, and it doesn't factor into your ideas at all. And Ali, would you mind putting the image I sent you?
That's where you get atheopagans.
Sure, I will pop that on in as long as it takes me to save it. Give me a second.
Awesome. But where you're basically, your race is your religion, and you just ignore your religion and just basically think you can do whatever you want because you have that race. It's
all right. I'm gonna put this over Cingeto's face because he's tormenting me by making me put it on screen.
He deserves it. In fact, we should really just kick him. But I'm too nice.
But that's basically the reverse of the anti-Abrahamic stuff, or extremely anti-Abrahamic stuff to an irrational degree. And the other part about the company or the org I just remembered was that they're actually attempting to do something I'm already working on as well, which it pisses me off because they're trying to basically right now, since Gaulish polytheism is so small, they're basically trying to get the keys to the kingdom so that they can basically become the face, so everyone will think we're racists. That's pretty much what they're going to end up doing if they succeed at their plans. And they're working on establishing Nemetans, like I'm working on, doing things like that, and also establishing a Gaulish Druidic order, which I'm also working on with some people. So that's another thing that irritates me about them, that they're also working on. And right now, because it's so new, they're trying to get the keys to the kingdom, and they're and if they end up succeeding, then the same thing that happened to Heathenry may happen to Gaulish stuff. So this is one of the reasons I want to do this stream, by the way.
So basically what you're saying is retreat to the nice Sumerian corner where it's impossible for us to have any focus because the genetic time lapse between when the Sumerians existed and when we exist now pretty much renders any traits.
Fighting back.
I mean, isn't
What?
that kind of the case for almost any Reconstructionism, for anything that is, like, pre-Christian era? Like, you could say the same thing about the Greeks. We've been, like,
No,
they're
not
so
with the
fucking
Sumerian.
interminx you wouldn't be able to tell.
Not so much with like you can still identify like sets of genes that locate you within like Greece, but within like Sumer, it's so far back that it's just like impossible since we're talking like around 4000 BC. Plus,
Yeah,
there also aren't many of us around.
yeah, like, my particular, like, tribe can trace ourselves all the way back to the land bridge, which I thought was really interesting when I saw that article. Because, like, our island chain is very close to where the land bridge was. We're kind of one of the few that still has a lot of the genetic variants, apparently, of those particular people, since we plunked ourselves down on an island and stayed there.
Yeah, for Sumer though, in the Middle East, it was not quite so much that went to the Akkadians and then so on.
But yeah, like, that's coming back to kind of what we were talking about. When you start to run into, like, say, friends, family members, folks in the communities themselves that have some folkish tendencies, when you start to see the red flags we talk about, disarming people with humor and also playing around with the logical inconsistencies of the things we're saying, of the things they're saying, is one of the best ways that you can sort of deal with these sorts of things. You're probably not going to convince the person you're talking to, but you might prevent somebody who would be listening to them from going along their side. If you understand what I mean. Like, we've ended up de-radicalizing a few people out of that Greek group that we talked about, just by kind of starting to break down some of the logical inconsistencies in the things that they were saying. And obviously, the AFA got turned in by heathens to the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group.
Yes.
Something similar is probably likely to happen to Daru if they continue being as blatantly and openly racist as they are.
Mm-hmm.
They probably just simply aren't big enough at this point for the SPLC to really take notice.
They seem pretty small right now. How big do you have to be for the SPLC?
I don't know if you. I mean,
Well, I mean, how big do they have to be for them to actually respond to me?
you can maybe submit it to them and see if they'll take it. They might. Like when I say they aren't big enough, I mean more they're not on their radar because they're so new and the SPLC literally hasn't heard of them.
So, I think that this is the point in the stream where it might be useful to talk about the, sort of the allure of othering and the allure of these sorts of folkish groups. Especially for folks who feel very isolated. Because we actually had one of our own at one point that went through something like this. One of the big things that can be alluring about these groups is often their size, but also the us versus them thing we talked about earlier. You remember the cheerleaders and the anime geeks and all that stuff.
Makes you feel special.
It makes you feel special, and it also binds your group together a lot harder, at least at first. At least until you reach that stage 4, well, fuck you, you're not a true Scotsman point.
Yeah.
Fuck you for being into Naruto, you're with the cheerleaders.
It keeps you strongly together for a while, but then it eventually fades. It's like a kind of glue that works for a good while and then eventually just peels off.
Yep.
Well, and a lot of these people are actively recruiting, which differentiates them from other pagan groups, and they tend to be very outspoken.
Oh, very
So
much.
the other thing that they will also tend to do is they will prey on solitary practitioners. Since we haven't been able, since a lot of us aren't exactly connected to large groups and whatnot, I think like the closest kindred to me would be like 50 miles away or so.
For me, I'd have to go all the way down to Portland, and that's, that's a 4-hour drive.
There's one existing Tibetan that I know of that exists in my country, the U.S.
So yeah. They will take advantage of some of the loneliness of the practitioners to basically say, hey, look, we have a group. You can have the group religious experience here, so on and so forth. You just have to accept a little bit of racism. But it's not really racism. It's just we don't like cultural appropriation.
Yeah, they try to butter it up in sweet words and try to try to take a bitter pill and try to butter it up in sweet words.
Well, and
Right.
a lot of folks, and a lot of those solitaries, they tend to particularly go after young men. But they, like, a lot of those solitaries often feel isolated because, let's face it, a lot of us don't have a family we practice with. A lot of us don't even have a family that accepts us, because if you came out of Christianity, chances are you might have been kicked out of your family because of it, or at the very least at odds with them if you're out. And so this allure of you feel persecuted, you feel beaten down, you feel kicked, you feel downtrodden, you feel like the world's against you, they turn around and they go, hey, you know what, kid? You're right. The world is against you, but we're not. You are oppressed, and it's because of these things, not not Christian hegemony, but because of your race.
And then it makes you feel like all the goodness in the world is in you, and all the badness is out there. Othering, people always talk about the downsides of othering, but there's also some good sides that feel good. I'm not saying they're good in general, but I'm saying they feel good.
Well, sometimes othering itself is not inherently a bad thing. Sometimes it's useful, like look at the civil rights movement.
Well, and sometimes othering is necessary. Like, for example, if there's a member of your group that is causing deliberate harm to other members of your group, you can then go about and exclude them for violating the principle of charity that you gave them. Right?
Right.
If you end up with a folkist in your group and they're actively, trying to get other people harmed, then it's perfectly fine to throw them out. But it's important to know and to remember that pagans are a persecuted group, right? Like, we're a religious minority. There's Christian hegemony, like, overriding all of us. Most people don't know the names of our holidays. Most people think our gods are mythological figures that, died out a long time ago. Most people don't even realize that our religions exist, and Reconstructionists are even tinier community within that tiny community. We're surrounded by Wiccans and eclectics. Which, there's nothing wrong with Wiccans and eclectics, but they are different from us in the fact that they are practicing a different path. And so there is this isolating factor and this loneliness and this feeling of being downtrodden and of, there is the ache of blazing your own path. And although it can be beautiful and powerful, it can also be isolating and lonely. And it's really important to make sure that you're looking out for that voice in the back of your head, that ego that's telling you, oh, the world's against me, but these people aren't. That's going to tell you to ignore those red flags if you find one of these groups.
Right.
And it's important to watch out for your friends, too, because you never know when somebody's starting to get pulled in.
I actually see this also affecting atheists as well. Like, a lot of atheists will be toxic against religion, mainly in order to get accepted by other atheists.
Well,
Instead
yeah,
of
like
having
Chris said that she was scared to come out because she was afraid, like, after she converted to Canaanite Reconstructionism, she was afraid of persecution by other atheists. We're specifically talking about anti-theists, though. Because not all atheists are shitty.
Well, here's the thing. I'm going to take a further step, and I'm going to say that when it comes to certain institutions, it's pretty much an endemic problem. I'm not going to name said institutions, but most people in the community will probably know what I'm talking about when I talk about the need to constantly hate against religion in order to be accepted by other atheists. Particularly, this institution is known for its memes and whatnot, and the toxic crowd that it gathers around.
I think everyone knows who you're talking about.
Well, and vitriol can become addictive, right? Being angry, like, there's been psychological research that has shown that being angry can itself become an addiction. There's a reason why folks who, like, watch very polarized news sources that tend to focus on negativity tend to get more and more and more aggressive. Because anger, itself releases dopamine afterwards as a form of relief. So, like, these groups feed on that. They feed on outrage. They feed on the feeling of victimization. They feed
which no
on
one's
your
ever
addictive
seen.
capacity.
Yeah, right. Which no one's ever seen any outrage in the atheist community. No.
No outrage. Nah, it's perfectly clean.
No. Outrage? Where's the outrage?
But in all seriousness, though, othering is a very big issue within these communities, and it can become very addicting. And it just makes you feel all good inside and all this stuff, and it's very tempting, but people really need to know how to overcome this, and they need to support their friends in order to overcome this as well.
Well, and I think that that's where communities like ours and like Oceans and, other areas around the web are so incredibly important. We can inoculate each other against this. We can build our own communities that can, at the very least, substitute for, until we're able to form our own, locally, that sort of connection that one expects with their religion. Because, like, let's face it, I'm a Greek Reconstructionist. We have a shit ton of festivals. Do I get to practice those? Well, I cook up a feast for some of them. I do my monthly rituals, but have I actually been able to go to a group where I'll be able to, pour wine libations in unison with a whole group of people who are singing the same praises for the gods that I worship every day? No. But what I can do is there's a group that I'm a part of that does a monthly libation, all at the same time that, does a Facebook cast, and we pour it together. And that's as close as I'm going to get for right now. I can talk to other Hellenic Reconstructionists on r/Hellenism and the r/Hellenism, Discord server. I can talk to people, in Ocean server and in our server about Hellenism. I can talk to other pagans who are practicing their own version of Reconstructionism that understand my drive to reconstruct, even if we have different practices. And that connection can stop groups like this from preying on me. Like, obviously, I'd pick that shit up at this point because, fuck racists, and being, mixed, they wouldn't target me anyway. But, like, people, this is something we can do for each other. And I think it's important. And I also think the last thing that I want to talk about before we open up to questions from the chat, so if y'all want to start spamming us questions, this will be the time to do it, and I'll start reading them in a bit. Is there's this tendency, because of how small our communities are, to want to hold back. Like, there's a tendency to be like, well, there's so few of us, so why should I speak out? Because this will make the whole movement look bad, and, like, it's such a small movement to begin with. Right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, like, we have to fight that. Because if we don't speak out against this shit, then what's going to happen is we're going to end up with another AFA. We're going to end up with another giant focused organization that ends up defining what it means to be heathen, what it means to be Greek, what it means to be Celtic, what it means to be a Reconstructionist. And we can't let them do that.
We can't let them have the keys to the kingdom.
No. And we can't let them lure other lonely solitaries into basically hell.
Right, so basically, this is where the heathens could kind of just look back at you and say, yeah, we've been down that path. It's a path you want to avoid, trust us.
So we got to do all we can to avoid it, especially with the smaller religious groups, because they're the ones who proportionally will have the biggest problems with these focus groups.
So that means, Cingeto, you're going to be making a Declaration 127 for the Celts?
I've been going to the Celtic text trying to find something. I've been working on it though.
Well, we actually have a version of it right now that, Kyrene actually put up, I think.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's the Xenia Accords. And
Xenia.
Xenia. But,
Xenia.
It specifically is a Hellenist declaration that no one will be excluded on the principles of Xenia from practicing with us and from attending our rituals on the basis of, like, sex, race, gender, specifically even religious affiliation, so long as they're respectful, mental health, and I believe the physical disability, and I believe the other one is sexual orientation.
And gender.
I mentioned gender at the beginning.
Oh, you did? Okay. Sorry. I was half paying attention and half looking at this little cute
I said
snake.
it separately from sex. I said sex and gender separately.
Yeah, okay, no. I got you.
So, like, the Hellenists and the heathens have decided to speak out. And if I have any Hellenic Reconstructionists in the chat right now, go check out, it's XENIA. I'll drop a link in the chat in the moment. If you haven't signed, then I don't see why you shouldn't. So these are the kinds of movements that we're talking about. Cingeto is working on putting together his own version. The Greeks have one. The heathens have one. I'm sure the Cometics, if they ever end up starting to deal with those problems, will end up with one as well.
Don't the Cometics already have issues with that?
Yes, they do.
Yeah. What? I forgot what it's called. It's like the House of Thoth? I don't remember.
But the point
House
is
of Thoth.
that we can work together to call this shit out and to stop it. And it's our responsibility as a community to do so. Like, if you care about the future of your religion, of your movement, of your faith, of your gods, to be honest, like, we are what people see of them, what is left on Earth. And although they have the power to change those things, what's to say that they would end up wanting to? It's our responsibility to show what, I guess, the level of acceptance that they have shown us. Many of us don't come from the particular culture whose religion we were called to. And it's worth it to remember that. And it's worth it to step out and to speak out when somebody is trying to claim that we don't have a right to that.
Yep, agreed.
Very much, I agree.
All right. So, I don't actually see any questions in the chat. I'm going to give you guys, because there's about a 15-second delay right now, I think. I'm going to give you guys a couple seconds to put some questions in there. But if you guys enjoyed the stream, I'd love to hear it. We're going to be moving over to the after show pretty soon. Let me see. Is the link to the Discord in the description, or do we need some... Yep. We've got a link to the Discord in the description if you guys haven't joined and you want to come join us for the after show. You'll be able to ask more questions there. Looks like we've had a pretty steady set of viewers for this particular stream. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yeah, especially the part where I'm about to cancel Cingeto. That's the best part of the stream.
Alright, so we need another round of Calon your mic because you had background noise.
You have background noise.
These nuts have background noise. Alright, so does the lack of questions in the stream mean that we're ready to wrap up and head on over to the Discord?
Yep, we covered Folkism perfectly.
Well, I mean, as perfectly as we could manage, given that it's clearly still rearing its ugly fucking head in our community. Ah, there we go. AR with the Calon your mic.
I think it should be my snake, actually. Such a cutie.
Alrighty. Well, with that, I am going to close up the stream. I'm going to click the end stream button. For those of you who aren't already part of it, again, there's a link to the Discord in the description. We will meet you guys over in the general chat over there. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope you guys enjoyed our random ramblings about folkism, and I hope that every person here is now more equipped to speak out against this shit when you see it. And for all the atheists in the audience, hopefully you can see that this is not our regular thing in the community. We are not all racist. There are just some very loud people. All right. So